Okay, we're going to talk about classical Greece today. We can divide classical Greece into three distinct periods with two major wars. Now, as you've gone through your reading, which I hope you have, because I picked the shortest book I could find for you. You're welcome. Maybe I should have picked a longer one. I picked Chester Star, a classic work, by the way, but, a bit dated. That's all right. I guess I am too. Three stages, two wars. We start off with the Persian Wars with our good buddy that we're getting familiar with, Herodotus. I even brought in a partial copy of Herodotus, several volumes. These, by the way, I want to mention to you since you are in this class. I don't know if you'll be taking more ancient history or not. But you ought to get familiar with the Loeb's Classical Library if you're going to study ancient history. The Loeb's Classical Library is published by Harvard University Press, so these volumes are not cheap. You know that right off the bat. In a multi-volume, like for Herodotus, I think it's 5 volumes, 5 of these, and like each one of these costs like $30, so it starts to add up. But why do you buy it? Because on one side you have the Greek text, on the other side you have the English translation. And the other reason is, for most scholars, sort of the standard way to cite these ancient texts is the Loeb classical apparatus. In other words, just like, say, the Bible, you look at Romans chapter 6, verse 13, everybody can go to the text and find that verse. For this, you would be, say, Herodotus, book 1, paragraph 133. And they will reference it that way. And so if you just have like a plain text of Herodotus, it's hard to reference it. And most people end up using the apparatus that the Loeb's Classics set up. And whether it's even the Loeb's thing, that's usually the way they cite it. Just so you know, when you look up a reference or you read it in a text and it'll say it's in Herodotus book 1, section 133 or whatever, you would go here. This volume has books 1 and 2. Look it up, look to section 133, which is usually a short paragraph. And within that short paragraph, you'll find what you're looking for. So you might think of it like book, chapter, verse, right? Although not quite that, but that's the way it works. So you should get aware of that. Now, so Herodotus writes, and what many people claim is that Herodotus is the first true historian because he writes lengthy discourse about events that happened during his lifetime in a, not only in a sort of an analytical way, right? Now, some people don't like to use the phrase father of history anymore because that's very patriarchal and very politically incorrect. So, okay, don't use that. But at any rate, Herodotus changes things, most people would say. Now, Herodotus is also somebody people like to, I'll say abuse because he's not alive, but they like to insult. They're insulting though he's not in the room, right? They're always picking him apart. And they'll say, well, obviously Herodotus is wrong about this, Herodotus was biased about that, and so forth. Okay. But if we didn't have Herodotus, what would you know to pick apart? You wouldn't know that much. Herodotus is the basic text on the Persian Wars, whether you like it or not. Okay? Whether you like it or not. Thucydides is our basic text in the Peloponnesian War. So what we see here in the classical period then are 3 stages with 2 major wars. The first war are the Persians and the Greeks fighting each other. Persians attack for revenge. The second war, you could call it a civil war because it's Greeks fighting Greeks. Now, of course, the Greeks had never been that unified. They had often fought each other, but this is really a coalition centered around Athens with a coalition centered around Sparta, and they are fighting a long war that we call the Peloponnesian War. Okay? So I don't know how far we're going to get today. Probably not far because we never get as far as I want. But let's move on. Let's talk about the Persian Wars then. How did the Persian Wars get started? The Persian Wars get started, if you remember when we talked about the early history of ancient Greece, okay, the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, and the early area, you need to know that the Greeks settled the west coast of Turkey, okay, what we would call Turkey today. The west coast of Turkey, they called it Ionia. In fact, there were a lot of colonies. We didn't talk about the colonies in here. Sorry, we didn't do it. That happens in the 7th century. Okay, the Greeks colonize all over around the Black Sea, along the west coast of Turkey. They go to southern Italy. They go to the southern part of France. They go all the way over to Spain. They go to North Africa, around Egypt, particularly. And they have these in a lot of islands, like the island of Sicily, has one of the largest Greek colonies anywhere. It's called Syracuse. And so the Greeks settle all over these places. In fact, the Greeks claim they were the ones that brought winemaking to the French, or to the French soil, because they made wine. They brought viticulture, as you would call it more technically, viticulture, that is growing of vines, grapes, the harvesting, the production of wine would all be included in viticulture. That they brought that to southern France. The French Riviera is what some people have called it, right? Beautiful, by the way. If you want to exile me to the south of France, well, I'll see if I can. Please. Oh, no. Yeah. Okay. It is beautiful. The lavender fields and nice hills and the ocean and nice sunny, nice climate. Anyway, that's where they went. And the southern part of Italy is if you remember, if you took the Rome class, the southern part of Italy is called Magna Graecae by the Latins because it's Greater Greece. Naples is Neapolis, and Syracuse and all these other places. Okay, so into that area of Ionia, which is the west coast of Turkey. And by the way, Ionia, if you've ever read the New Testament, if you haven't, I recommend it. There would be a lot of places that are mentioned there in the New Testament are in Ionia, where Paul goes, in the book of Acts. Places like Ephesus, Pergamum, okay, Troas, and Sardis, and Smyrna, one of my favorite names, Smyrna. All of those, and Miletus, those are all in Ionia, okay? So, what happens is that West Coast has connections back to mainland Greece because they're colonial cities. They have trade and so forth. The Persians move in under Cyrus. Cyrus is really the guy who makes Persia into an empire. He moves into Ionia in 546, expanding his territory from Mesopotamia, what today would be Iraq, Syria. He moves northward. Just like today, you got Turkish troops that are fighting as we speak, no doubt, in Syria, and who knows where else, because they share a long border with Syria and Iraq. If you go out in that part of Turkey, and I've been there, I've driven around out there, they've got, look at the thing they got borders with. They got a border with Georgia, not the one with Atlanta, but the other one. Armenia, they don't get along with them too well. We won't get into that right now. Iran, Iraq, Syria. Okay, those are all the neighbors of Turkey. So you know why Turkey is, got a tough place. But he comes northward out of Mesopotamia, basically up out of the Tigris and Euphrates River Valley, Mesopotamia, and he moves northward into Turkey, and then he moves out to the coast because there's good harbors, and he takes it over in 546. Now the Persians were tolerant rulers. Tolerant. What do I mean by that? I mean that basically what the Persians would do, instead of taking over, let's say, Ionia, kicking everybody who was in power out and saying it's our way or the highway, right? As is quite common in it seems like today, anyway, in various places. In other words, you do it this way or you don't do it at all. What the Persians did is they came into an area, they left. They basically went to these people who were leaders and said, you know what, you're the leader here. If you want to remain the leader here, here's what you need to do. You need to be loyal to us. You need to pay taxes to us. You need to keep the peace in your area. Keep it stable. No revolts, no riots. You collect the taxes and you send them to me. You can stay in power. And guess what? Most people took them up on that. Because if it wasn't that, what would they be doing? And so that's why they're tolerant. They didn't come in and rip down all the temples, and they didn't come in and do, say, well, you got to follow all the Persian things. You got to dress like a Persian or whatever. You keep doing life the way you're doing it, except now we're in charge. And that means you pay us the taxes. In return, of course, we keep you safe. We'll come and protect you. All right? Protection money, right? So that's what I mean by tolerant. But the Greeks are very independently minded. They didn't like the idea that they were under the thumb of the Persians. And so, about 50 years later, they revolted in Ionia back when there was a transition in power. And this is normally when things happen in history, certainly in ancient history, but the same today. Is that, when somebody is in power and everything's very stable, everybody just kind of has to go with it, right? But now a leader dies and new leaders come into power. This is our chance. That's what they did. So we're going to revolt. And they did. They revolted in 499. Now the new leader, whose name is Darius. Oh, by the way, before I move on from this Cyrus, you should know, because I know you're all scholars of the Bible, he is mentioned in the Old Testament under what context? What did he do? Yes. Yes, he is the one who frees the Jews in Babylon. He's the one who conquered the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And when he finds all these Jews here from, Palestine, Israel, he says, well, if you want to go back, you can go back. See, Persians were tolerant. You can stay if you want to stay, but you don't have to stay. Now, by the way, a lot of them did stay, but a lot of them went back. Because of that, out of all these names that we use, and I always joke that you find a lot of good baby names in my classes, names that have not been used. Everybody wants a unique name for their kid. And so what do? They throw in an extra Y, or they put a silent L, or I don't know. They put Or the apostrophe. Yeah, something. I don't know. They do something they take a regular name. I'll take the name Cindy because that's not that popular anymore. They'll take Cindy, which is usually C-I-N-D-Y, and they'll make it like C-Y-N-D-I. Right? Cindy. Something like that. You get what I'm talking about. So then the kid grows up angry. Why? Because no one ever spells their name right. And they always say, oh, Cindy with a Y? Really? Oh, Y? And an I? Oh, but the Y and the I are... okay, Cindy. And then they go to wherever, the amusement park. I guess around here it's always Disney. Everything's Disney around here. Everything's the mouse. They go there and they can't find their name on those little things with names on it. Like for your keys or for those little license plates you put on your door, and they flip around and they see C-I-N-D-Y and they say, they never spell my name right. And they get very angry. So if they're going to get angry anyway, why not give them a new name that, no one is going to say that's spelled wrong because they've never heard it before.
I know where this is going. Then they try to get into art school in Germany. They get rejected.
No, I'm not. That's a different class. That's a different class. But yes, but I don't think that was because of the license plate name on the door. But anyway, might have been some other stuff going on there. But yes. So how about the name Darius? Now you do hear that sometimes, Darius sometimes. But the most common of these ancient names would be Cyrus. Why? Because many Jews named their children Cyrus in honor of the Persian ruler, who was a pagan, by the way, but who released the Jews. So he becomes a hero. You find lots of people named Cyrus. coming out of the Jewish community, and then from there, you also find it sort of trickling down in other parts, because people hear the name. You hear the name Cyrus, at least you used to. Don't hear it much anymore, but it'd be a good name to bring back. In fact, my grandfather in the academic world, see, you know what I'm saying? I have an academic grandfather and an academic father, yes. My doctor father, that's what he's called. That's what the Germans call him, doctor father. Your doctor father is the person that your mentor that you study with when you work on your PhD. My doctor father's name was Edwin Yamauchi. I think he's Irish. No, he's not. He's not. But his doctor father was Cyrus Gordon. So my doctor grandfather was Cyrus Gordon, who was Jewish. He's no longer with us. And he taught for many years at Brandeis University and at New York University. And pretty well known. Some people don't always agree with him, but he was pretty well known. Cyrus then releases the Jews. He moves north. He takes this over. A revolt happens when Darius takes control. Now here's the thing that's going to make them really, really mad. Darius really, really mad. Notice the revolt happens in 499. He doesn't really respond to it until 494. Why? Well, they use snail mail to let him know. Snail mail. No. They, in fact, he had a lot of other stuff going on. By the way, speaking of snail mail, and your father's a postman, the post office has most of them have a slogan, right? They have a little phrase. No, not that one. I'm talking about, that is a slogan, but there's a much older slogan. It's about snow and rain and sleet and dark of night will not keep us from our appointed rounds. You know who recorded that? Herodotus. You know who he's recording it about? The Persian postal system. Okay, so if you go to the big post office in New York, they've got that inscribed up above, and it's kind of a slogan, a very old one, for the postal system, that we're not going to let bad weather and all these other things keep us. We're going to get out there and get up early in the morning, do all these things to deliver your stuff. That was really the Persians had the royal road from Sardis to Susa. Sardis is in Ionia. It's in western Turkey. And Susa is way down in the southern part of Mesopotamia. They would send messages. They would send troops. They would send everything along this royal road in sort of what we might call Pony Express style. The Pony Express style did not start with the Pony Express. It started in the ancient times where you would transfer messages from person to person on a route to take them, Anyway, just made me think of that. I guess gets me off the track, as I often do. But it's all related. Now, he gets the message. It's not because the message was slow. It's not because, he didn't find out till 5 years later and we're going to blame the Persian post office. No, he knew about it, but he had other things that he had to do. He had lots of other people rebelling. He had to go and put down those other rebellions, and this one was not at the top of his list. Okay? Ionia was kind of a backwater to the Persians. If you take a look at the Persian Empire, how huge it is, you'll notice why. So when he does get around to it, he gets there, and what does he find? That this rebellion is going on. Okay, he can understand maybe these people want to be independent, but then he finds out that there's another city that's meddling in Persian affairs. See, if the Ionian cities want to rebel against Persia, that is a Persian situation. But if the Athenians are sending supplies and warships to help them, and the Persians have never conquered them, Persians don't have anything to do with them, they are meddling in Persian affairs. It makes him very, very angry. So, spoiler alert, he puts down the rebellion, and those cities stay under Persian control. The Persians do win. But the key of this is he remembers, and the Persians remember, what the Athenians did. The Athenians messed with the Persian Empire. And what they felt, the Persians anyway felt, the Athenians really didn't have any reason to get involved. They're meddling in your affairs. This is what's going to lead to the war. So, Darius will in fact assign one of his servants to come to him every day and say, remember the Athenians. Right? He want to make sure he didn't forget about it. He want to make sure he didn't get too busy with other things. So, now, I don't know if I would have wanted to be that servant, because I imagine every time you said it, he got angry. And you know how people are. They blame the messenger, like you do with me. I had nothing to do with the test you took. You took it. It's the computer. But yet you blame me somehow. Or, whatever, the attendance thing, the parking problems. I don't have anything to do with any of those things. But if I have to tell you about it, then you get mad at me. Yeah, well, it's guilt by association. That's all right. But anyway, I don't know if I'd want to be that servant, because you would go up to him. Maybe he'd be in a good mood, having a great time. He's at a party, and you go, remember the Athenians. And he gets mad. It's like you've messed up his day because you've reminded him of this thing that he's got to take care of. And he knows he told you to remind him, but he still doesn't like it. Well, I could make mention here of other things like a list, My wife makes lists for me. I guess she makes them for her, but I don't worry about those. Makes them for me. And in fact, she even now, since she's figured out that I don't always look at the list, she now puts it on the refrigerator. Postcards, like little note cards with, do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and there might be 8 or 10 things up there. And then, when I get that done, I can take that off. However, I notice something magically reappears very shortly. So those lists keep hounding me. Or students send me emails at midnight and they tell me about the Respondes thing or something. And I have to write back. I had like 5 emails last night, and I wrote back and said, look, I can't do anything about that. Here's an 800 number. Call the 800 number. You can't get it to load, Of course, I have gone over that before, but yes.
I just realized the last party you had at your house, your wife had us all make you lists.
Yes, exactly. Oh, she is very list-oriented. How's that? You can ask her. She's very proud of her list. She loves her lists. She has a list. That's the first thing she does. In fact, on her computer, she has her list. And so she'll have a file like, on the, she'll click on right on the screen there with all the little things, click on the desktop, boom, it pops up, and that's her list. If it gets on the list, then she just scrolls through her list, deletes something, puts something else on it, perhaps rearranges it. But yeah, she is very task-oriented. How's that? Well, so remember Athens. You thought I forgot where I was. Maybe I did. So he sends his troops. He assembles an army, not a big army, because after all, these are just kind of, punk, Athens. From the Persian perspective, Greece is just tiny. They have a huge empire. Hundreds of thousands of square miles. Greece, what do we say? Greece is about the size of half of the state of New York, even at its biggest extent. And Athens is just one little piece of it. So, I don't need that many troops, right? So he sends down some troops. They come across the north. They run into some troubles there with their goods because some of the waters there are unknown to them. And they end up at Marathon. Marathon is a plain outside of Athens. You can go there. I've been there. You can go to the plain of Marathon. And you could see where they fought. This is where the Athenians waited for them. According to Herodotus, of which, some people scorn his numbers, and I will admit a lot of his numbers are very round, right? Very round numbers. He says the Persians had 30,000, the Athenians had 10,000. So in other words, the Athenians were outnumbered 3-1. Let's just put it that way. Okay? And then they fight. Guess what? The Athenians hold off the Persians. And according to Herodotus, 192 Athenian warriors died that day. That's a very specific number, which makes me think that one's pretty accurate. In fact, if you go to the plain of Marathon today, you will see a mound. It's still there. It's not a very ceremonial. You would think it would be perhaps more. Maybe it's changed, but I saw it maybe 10 years ago. It's not. It's just next to a road, and there's like a little parking area, and there's a sign, kind of like in a national park, a little sign, and then there's a mound, and the grass is kind of growing up, the weeds are kind of growing up over the mound. But the mound is there, and the mound is maybe 30 feet high, and it's said that the 192 are buried in that mound. So this is a monument. This is a memorial to the Battle of Marathon. And, by the way, the marathon race, which is famous today, connected with this battle, has nothing really to do with this battle in ancient times. Right? How long is a marathon today? I know we got. I can look in here. I can see we've got several marathoners in our midst.
3 miles?
No. A lot more than that.
Like 26 miles.
26.2 miles. Why is it 26.2 miles? Would you say, well, from Marathon to Athens is 26.2 miles? No, that's close. 26.2 miles from Windsor Palace to Buckingham Palace. What? Yes, because the first time they ever ran a marathon race, it was in the first modern Olympics. They hadn't had Olympics for a long time, and they thought, hey, we need to create a new race, and they had to think about the marathon. It's about 26 miles, and then they measured and they said, well, from Buckingham Palace to Windsor Palace is 26.2 miles. Okay, we're going to have people run from one palace to the other. So now every marathon race around the world is 26.2 miles, because that's the distance between those two palaces. It really has nothing to do, it's an approximation of the distance from Marathon to Athens. Now, by the way, after they fought the battle, a guy did run. It was not really a race, but he ran as a messenger to go back to Athens to tell them that the Persian threat had been stopped. And then, of course, what you got to remember when you're running your marathon is the first guy who ran the marathon died. As soon as he told them, we defeated the Persian, he falls over, he's dead. Okay? So just keep that in mind. If you're going to decide, hey, let's get up today and run a marathon, maybe you want to work your way up to it. Maybe you just want to say, hey, you know what? Maybe you don't have to go 26.2 miles to prove that I'm a wonderful human being. But anyway, whatever reason you do it, keep that in mind. The Persians do leave. Okay? Now here is a map that shows us, and I wish it was more colorful, but anyway, it's descriptive. It shows us the outline of Persia. Okay? So you can see all the way from over here. Here, way over there is Greece. And way over here, of course, you're to India, you're to Afghanistan, you're down to Pakistan. You've got the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. Over here's Athens. Look how big this is. Look how big that is. You see why the Persians didn't think this was that. But this is the Empire of Darius. It's a huge empire. In fact, it was the largest ancient empire up to that time, including Egypt and so forth. Now, Xerxes. Now, If I was going to make my case for what you ought to call your firstborn son, this would be the one I'd push hardest for. Because I've been pushing for it for many years. I have yet to receive that digital photo with some smiling person holding a little baby, and they say, we just want to tell you, Dr. Wineland, we named our little baby Xerxes because of your class. That's all. Is that asking too much? That's not. It wouldn't even cost you anything. The kid could be called Xerxes. I guarantee he'd be the only one in his school named Xerxes. He wouldn't be able to find the license plate thing, but still, he would know he had a cool name of a great warrior king. Yes.
The middle name?
What's that?
The middle name?
Well, that's okay. Yeah, I did have somebody who named their daughter Constantine as a middle name, which I thought was kind of unusual. And she sent that to me. And I thought, well, okay, that's all right. And, there's always pets, but, I think Xerxes deserves more than a Dachshund or something, or even a pit bull. It needs a person. Anyway, Xerxes. It's a name with two X's. You don't get many of those. I mean, you got Xerox, but you don't want to name your kid Xerox. Xerxes. And by the way, if you say, oh, well, we want a Bible name, he is a Bible name. He's in the Bible. How is Xerxes mentioned in the Old Testament? Esther. He was the husband of Esther. Very biblical. Yeah, good guy. Loved Esther. Killed the bad guy in the story. Xerxes. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. All right. Xerxes. Had a nice palace, by the way. And his wife won the beauty contest, right? The Miss Persia contest. He said, I want to marry the most beautiful woman in the land, and then, got down to Esther. Well, that's a whole other story for a whole other class. But the same guy, he's the Bible guy of Esther, but he is also now the guy who's going to attack the Greeks. In 486, he assembles a huge army. According to our good buddy Herodotus, and this number, I don't know anybody who fully accepts this number, 2 million. He says 2 million. Well, perhaps a little hyperbola. Perhaps a little hyperbole there. It's kind of like I hear sometimes around campus, I won't name any names, but some people say, I got 1 million things to do. Do you really have 1 million? Is it really 1 million? No. It's not really 1 million. I'm sure it's not really 1 million. Is it 100? Maybe it's 100. Right? It's hyperbola. Right? It's to emphasize the fact you got so much to do that basically you're not going to get it all done, that you're overwhelmed. Now, when Herodotus gets the reports of these troops, how did they ever estimate the numbers? Like that other number we had, 30,000 and 10,000. The guys didn't line up and wear name tags. Right? And we get to count. Okay, before you guys fight, let me just get the numbers right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, don't move. 5, 6, 7. That's not going to happen. So how do they do it? They do it like they do in any military setting. They estimate. All military numbers are estimates. When it comes to like troop numbers and things like that, it's not exact. So how do they do that? Well, people are trained in the military to estimate troop strength visually. Of course, today we use drones and all other kinds of things. I'm sure we can use like a density thing of a picture and put it into a computer and come up with a much better thing than the way they used to do it in the old days, which was a guy would get up on a hilltop or something, he'd look out, kind of take a grid and say, okay, that's got like 1,000. He'd say, okay, they've got 10,000, we've got 5,000. That's how it is. Now, what does this mean? This means that when they looked out at the troops, they could not see the end of them. The troops just kept coming and coming. And Herodotus, in his writings, goes down through and he enumerates where these troops came from. They came from all over the Persian Empire. They called up the troops from Bactria. They called up the troops from, Pontus, from everywhere. And they were assembled in divisions. And they are all marching on Athens. Woo. Wow, really? Yes. And they knew that Darius had some troubles, and so they even sent an advance team, I guess we would call them today, right? An advance team, the Army Corps of Engineers equivalent, to go, and they dug a canal so they could move. They wouldn't get trapped in some bad waters there in the north, in Macedonia. And they built a pontoon bridge across the Hellespont. The Hellespont is the narrow entrance into the channel of water that leads to the Black Sea. And so we see that they actually lashed boats together so that they could move. The Persians did not have a great navy. Persians did not have a great navy. They were not a great naval power. But what they did have was a great army. We still got a minute. So they moved along that way, and you can see some of the vessels they would use. You can see Xerxes there. Of course, this is also the same guy in that movie everybody likes, that sort of semi-animated The 300, which people always ask me about. They say, is that correct? And I'll say, well, there were Persians, there were Greeks, they did fight. So yes, that part's correct. A lot of the rest of it, not as correct. Whew. My computer still says I got about 10 seconds. But we will leave it there. Remember, we meet again on Friday, so we will see you then.